Hi, I'm Shani Dyer. I'm the CEO of ARCS Australia. ARCS is an organisation that represents people working in the development of therapeutics in Australia. I'd like to introduce Meg.
Hi, I'm Megan McElwain. I'm the president of the New Zealand Association of Clinical Research. We are a professional members organisation and we represent the clinical researchers in New Zealand.
Megan represents clinical research workers in New Zealand, and we thought they were a really important group that we wanted to engage with. So very recently we've signed an MOU with NZACRes so that we can cooperate and share information more easily. So their organisation represents the people in New Zealand working in clinical research, and there's lots of things that we can do together and share that particularly around education that really makes sense.
There is, and NZACRes is just so happy to collaborate with ARCS because the more clinical trials you do in Australia, the more we will do in New Zealand. The two countries work very well together.
Yeah, they do.
In New Zealand at the moment we have approximately 400 active studies, which is approximately 20% of the number of clinical studies that you're doing in Australia, and that's in line with the differences in the population. I would say that in New Zealand we're remarkably simple to start up a study with. We have really straightforward regulatory approval timelines and also ethics approval. You only need one ethics committee approval, and all of those processes can occur in parallel.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. So in Australia, we have a federated system, and we work across a number of states. We have significantly more clinical trials happening, and we're on the basis of we've got really solid medical research institutes where we've got really good clinicians and capability to undertake clinical trials. We also have a really good governance framework around clinical trials, and the policy environment is really looking to ensure that we can bring clinical trials to Australia for the benefit of Australian patients.
And it's so easy as well because the standard of care is very similar across the two countries, so that's a very important consideration when you're designing those protocols for clinical trials. We, in New Zealand, we actually take a lot of inspiration from the Australian clinical trials guidelines, and we usually adopt very similar approaches to what your clinicians are doing.
So I think it'd be really useful for organisations to know that they can seamlessly work across Australia and New Zealand in clinical trials.
That's right.
In Australia, we're working towards building competency frameworks which will help develop and professionalise our workforce, and this is really important for us. As we've spoken about at the conference, we really find an important point about the products that we make to have good quality, safety and efficacy. And we want that same kind of mindset around the workforce that we have here in Australia. So ARCS is really leading the whole process of building competency frameworks, not just across clinical research, but all the areas involved in the development of therapeutics. So regulatory affairs, health economics, medical affairs. Really important that all of those groups working on development of therapeutics have consistency in the competency frameworks that we adopt. We work also with organisations in the US and in Europe who are also adopting competency frameworks. So the ACRP, we work closely with them as well because they're facing the same sort of problems with workforce that we are, and whilst they might have be further down the road in developing their competency frameworks, we're probably further down the road in building an appropriate policy environment and proper frameworks that will enable competency frameworks to be implemented here in Australia. ARCS runs an annual conference which is the biggest gathering of people working on the development of therapeutics in Australia. We cover all areas of development of therapeutics. We have great engagement with our regulators, with industry, with our clinical colleagues. So we really believe that bringing the whole community together to discuss the issues that are really important to all of us is incredibly important. the types of topics that we've discussed this year's conference is around some of the processes to review technologies. We have a thing called HTA, which is the Health Technology Assessment process, and I think that hasn't been reviewed for over 20 years, and there's significant discussion around that at the conference. Importantly, understanding that given the changes to the types of products in development now, with regenerative medicines, with AI, all sorts of technologies, we really need to assess the way that HTA is performed, and the work that we've done with the conference today is talking about that. We're also in the process of reviewing our national medicines policy. Again, it's been over 20 years since that's been reviewed. So all of these things are really important because having these good policies and systems in place are part of the ecosystem that ensures that it's effective for companies to come to Australia to do clinical trials if they know that they can get their products reimbursed and accepted through the HTA system. So the conference really looked at all the different aspects of development of therapeutics to ensure that we're all discussing the topics that are really important to take our sector forward.
Absolutely. It's been the most incredible event. It's, 7 concurrent streams has been overwhelming to try to get to everything that you want to see. From my point of view, some highlights for me have been, from an operational point of view, looking at how Australia is trying to streamline your HREC approval systems.
Oh, yeah.
That is huge to listen to. And then also this morning there was talk about increasing patient ethnic diversity in clinical trials. And I saw an example that really stood out to me was the flash glucose monitoring clinical trial, which was with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. And the video consent form that they were using, I just thought that was an excellent example of consent that's fit for purpose. So really exciting to see.
Yeah, I think the innovation is not just in the products, but it's in the way we take the products to market and explain and communicate to our community about what it is that clinical trials can do and what it means to be on a clinical trial. It's really important.
There's so much we take for granted working in clinical research. We think that everybody knows what the process of randomization is or what clinical research actually means, and how do we translate that for the people who are ultimately going to take part. NZACRes is hosting a conference in August. It's the 24th, 25th of August, 2023. It's a biennial conference, but for obvious reasons, we haven't had one since 2019. So our first event in 4 years, we're very excited to host it, and we're so excited to have representatives from ARCS. So Shani and Sue Mason from ARCS will be attending, and this will be the biggest event in clinical research for New Zealand clinical researchers. So we are so excited to see everyone there and to reconnect, to meet kanohiki te kanohi, which is Maori for face-to-face, because that face-to-face interaction is so important. You just don't get these good interactions over Zoom. So we hope to see you all there.
Australia is, like New Zealand, a really attractive place for doing clinical trials because we've got an incredibly active medical research group across Australia. We have a fantastic health system and clinicians who are really keen on innovation in the health system. So both industry-sponsored trials and investigator-initiated trials are very active here in Australia. So, it makes for a great environment to do clinical trials. We also have an incredibly diverse patient population, so a lot of different ethnic backgrounds live in Australia. And also we're, like other countries, implementing a concept of decentralised trials to access patients and people not living in the cities, but it then gives you access to a whole range of new patients in a really seamless way.
That's right. And we also offer things like R&D tax incentives in this part of the world for any sponsors doing clinical research here if they meet certain criteria, which we are always trying to make sure that they do. Our patient population, as well as being diverse, they're very open to clinical research, so people want to participate and they're keen to share their health information if they think it's going to improve health outcomes for other people. They really have an altruistic approach to participating in clinical research, which is so important. And just as you said, top quality clinicians, top quality healthcare, and our clinical sites work to a very high standard. Now that the pandemic has been declared over, it's just wonderful to see the entire world opening up. But I do just want to highlight that, we were so lucky in New Zealand. We had no COVID cases for a very long time, and by the time that we did, such a significant percentage of our population was actually vaccinated, and that allowed us to keep going with clinical trials. We actually continued the conduct of several studies during the pandemic, and that created a huge opportunity for New Zealand because we really were able to shine on the international stage. And now people have really noticed us, and they're taking advantage of that continuation of services that we demonstrated during the pandemic.
And in Australia, we did much the same. So we were probably a little bit more impacted by COVID, but we worked with the government. So industry worked with the government to say if it was safe for the patient, if it was safe for the staff and safe for the data, then there's no reason why clinical trials shouldn't continue, because again, for us, whilst we're impacted by COVID, it didn't have the same level of impact on the hospital system because we were in lockdown and we did manage the infection rate before everybody was vaccinated. And then, like you, once we were vaccinated, then we could work and the clinical trials could continue. But it again, for us, created a great opportunity because the rest of the world were closed down, and they said, "Wow, look at Australia and New Zealand. They're open for business. So let's go down and do our clinical trials there."
Exactly.